Night fell silently over Senzalima, a peculiar village lost among the dense trees of an imposing forest. Under the silver light of the full moon, every detail of the place seemed shrouded in a cloak of mystery. For those who didn't know its history, the scene might seem peaceful. But in Senzalima, peace came at a price. There, no one saw the world as it was, as all inhabitants were born without eyeballs. There were no eyes to catch the light or contemplate the shadows. Yet they had learned to see in other ways, hearing, feeling, and moving with almost magical precision. That night, however, something disturbed the apparent tranquility. A scream, a sharp, desperate sound, so out of the ordinary that it seemed to cut through the very essence of the air. It echoed through the forest and reached the village, causing people to rise abruptly from their mats. The drums, used as an alarm signal, began to play rhythmically and urgently. They communicated what words could not. Danger. Amadi, a young man known for his insatiable curiosity, felt his chest tighten as he heard the scream and the drums. He didn't know why, but something about that sound drew him irresistibly. He ran barefoot down the path that would take him to the center of the village, where the elders were gathered. The cold earthen floor beneath his feet and the damp smell of the surrounding trees seemed to intensify his urgency. When he arrived at the central square, Amadi realized that he was not the only one bothered. People murmured uneasily, seeking guidance. The elders were in a circle, debating quietly, trying to interpret what this meant. The eldest of them, Kijani, raised his hand to silence the crowd. His deep voice echoed. The scream came from the forbidden forest. Something has upset the balance of our world. Stay alert, but stay here. The danger is out. Amadi heard the words, but something inside him said there was more. He felt that the scream was not just a warning, but a call. Before he could question the elders, a different sound made him catch his breath. Steps, light and firm steps, coming from the opposite side of the square. It was unusual for someone to enter Senzalima without being noticed, but there was someone. The figure emerged from the silence like an inescapable presence. It was a woman, her confident stance and purposeful steps contrasting with everyone else's trepidation. The entire village fell silent, sensing his arrival. His firm voice cut through the air, surprising everyone. You can't go on like this. I bring answers. Amadi felt his heart racing. Answers? About what? He took a step forward, but the crowd began to stir in murmurs. Some people whispered words of fear, others of hope. Kijani, with his usual authority, interrupted the murmurs. Who are you? And what do you want with our people? The woman was silent for a moment, as if deliberating how best to respond. His voice sounded again, clear and decisive. My name is Naya. I come from the world beyond the Forbidden Mountain. I can see. Amadi held his breath. The word see was not part of the village's everyday vocabulary. It was an abstract idea associated with ancient legends. Feeling, hearing, perceiving. These were the forms of understanding in Senzalima. But see, this was something almost forbidden to talk about. The murmurs grew louder. People were in shock. Naya, however, did not seem intimidated. She continued walking until she stopped in the center of the square, as if she knew exactly where she was. Amadi felt a wave of curiosity and desperation rise within him. Against all tradition, he spoke directly to the stranger. Who are you really? How did you find our home? Naya turned her head towards him, as if she could see him perfectly. His answer was simple, but full of mystery. I followed the call. Something is wrong here, and I can help fix it. Before Amadi could ask further, Kijani stepped forward, his voice thick with authority. No one corrects what the gods created. This village isn't balanced, foreign. You are not welcome here. Naya raised her hand, as if to calm the mood. I did not come to challenge your gods. But there is a truth that has been hidden from you, something that keeps them trapped. Amadi couldn't contain the question that burned in his mind. If that's true, then why hasn't anyone else come to tell us? Naya sighed, and for the first time, her voice revealed a tone of sadness. Because it's not easy to see what's hidden. But you, Amadi, you feel it. I know you feel. Amadi stood still. She was right. There was always something inside him that seemed incomplete, something that couldn't be fulfilled by the village's traditions. But before he could respond, Kijani spoke again, his voice now thick with anger. Enough! You are confusing our people with lies. Leave, or you will face the consequences. Naya didn't move. Instead, her lips curved into a faint smile, and she replied calmly, I didn't come to fight. I came to free. Amadi knew this was just the beginning. Something profound had changed that night, and he felt like his life would never be the same again. Amadi remained motionless. Although his heart was racing, he could feel the murmurs and tense breathing around him, like an invisible wave of energy running through Senzalima's central square. Naya's announcement had shaken not only the order of the village, but also something much deeper within. Since he was a child, Amadi has felt a constant restlessness, an inexplicable feeling that the world around him was incomplete. He had never dared to share this feeling with the elders, fearing that he would be reprimanded for questioning what they called the blessing of the gods. But now, in front of that woman who spoke of seeing, the restlessness inside him seemed to take shape like a fire about to be lit. Naya stood in the center of the square, calm but firm. Despite the hostility in Kijani's tone and the disbelief that spread among the villagers, his presence did not waver. Amadi knew he should keep quiet, respect the elders, and follow what he was taught. But Naya's words echoed in her mind. I can see. He took a hesitant step forward, feeling the eyes, or lack thereof, of the entire village on him. His voice sounded hesitant, but filled with curiosity. What do you mean, see? How can you be here, among us, if you know that we do not belong to this world of vision? Naya tilted her head slightly, as if she was sizing up the young man in front of her. His response was barely above a whisper, but clear enough for everyone around him to hear. Haven't you ever wondered why your steps take you to places you don't know? Your curiosity is your vision, Amadi. The mention of his name made the young man shudder. How did she know who he was? He felt the urgency to understand more, to delve deeper into the truths that this woman seemed to carry. But before he could speak again, Kijani stepped forward, his voice thick with disdain. Enough of this. Don't be fooled, Amadi. This woman is an intruder, and nothing she says can be true. Amadi hesitated for a moment, but something inside him seemed to push him forward. He ignored the elder's warning and took a few more steps towards Naya. When he was close enough to feel her presence like a wave of heat, his voice came out almost like a rant. If you can see, then you can help me understand what is wrong with all of us. He felt the words escape his lips before he even thought them, as if a greater force was guiding him. Naya smiled slightly, but there was sadness in her eyes, something that Amadi, even without seeing them, could feel. You know what's wrong, Amadi. I always knew. He just never had the courage to admit it to himself. Her words hit him like a blow. He remembered the nights he lay awake, listening to the sound of the wind through the trees and feeling the weight of something invisible on his shoulders. Amadi knew there was something beyond what the elders taught, something he could never fully understand. The elders say our blindness is a blessing from the gods, he began, his voice breaking. But if it's a blessing, why do I feel so empty? Why does it feel like we're stuck with something we can't see or touch? Naya took a step towards him, and he could feel the intensity of her presence even stronger now. Because you are trapped, Amadi. Trapped by a curse that was placed generations ago. A curse that the elders know about, but have never dared to face. The silence that followed her words was almost deafening. Amadi felt as if the air around him had become thicker, almost impossible to breathe. He looked in Kijani's direction, even though he knew he could never see her expression. In truth, he asked, his voice thick with urgency, do you know about this? Kijani hesitated, but before he could respond, Naya intervened. They know enough to keep you in the dark, both literally and metaphorically. But the truth, Amadi, cannot be hidden forever. That's why I'm here, to bring it to light. Amadi felt a mixture of hope and fear rise within him. He wanted to believe Naya, but the idea that her entire life had been built on a lie was almost unbearable. He took another step towards her, now close enough to hear her breathing. What do you want from me? He asked, voice low. Naya placed her hand lightly on his shoulder, a gesture that felt more like a promise than comfort. I don't want anything, Amadi, but you want answers. And to find them, you need to be willing to face truths you might prefer not to know. Those words left him silent. He felt like he was facing an abyss, about to take a leap without knowing what he would find on the other side. But something about Naya, the firmness of her voice and the conviction of her words, made him want to trust her. He knew he couldn't turn back now. Then tell me what to do, he said finally. If there is a truth, I want to find it. Naya nodded slightly, as if she had already expected that answer. You started doing this the moment you decided to listen to me, Amadi. The rest of the path will be difficult, but you will not be alone. You just have to be willing to question everything you think you know. He swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words. But deep down, I knew she was right. He always knew there was something more, and now he finally had a chance to find out what it was. The warning drums sounded again, cutting through the night like thunder that appears out of nowhere. This time the knock was more urgent, more threatening, as if the very soul of the village was in danger. The sound reverberated through the thatched huts, echoing in the hearts of every villager. The children cried, while the elders murmured prayers to the gods, trying to ward off their growing fear. In the central square, Kijani walked forward, his firm steps leaving marks on the packed earth. His presence was like an imposing shadow, loaded with authority and weight. Amadi felt a chill run down his spine. He knew the confrontation was coming. Kijani stopped a few steps away from Naya, who remained serene, as if oblivious to the growing tension around her. His firm stance seemed like a silent challenge to the elder's figure. Kijani raised his hand, and silence fell over the crowd. His deep voice echoed, filled with accusation and anger. You defy the gods by bringing a vision that does not belong to us, foreign. He pointed a trembling finger at Naya, as if her presence were an affront to the village's very existence. Senzalima thrives under the blessings of the gods. Our blindness is our strength, our protection. And you, with your poisonous words, threaten to destroy everything we have built. Naya didn't back down. His expression remained calm, but his eyes, which seemed to see more than anyone there could imagine, shone with an unusual intensity. His voice was firm, but without aggression, like a sharp blade that cuts effortlessly. You call this protection, Kijani? A limited life, where the truth is hidden behind traditions that no one dares question. It's not the gods that keep them blind. It's fear. His words echoed in the square like a shockwave. The villagers murmured uneasily, but no one dared to move. Amadi felt his heart speed up. Naya's words awakened something inside him, something he could no longer ignore. Kijani stepped forward, his face hardened like stone. Shut up! You know nothing about our people, our history. You are an intruder, a threat to order. I will not allow you to destroy the balance we have fought so hard to maintain. He turned to the village guards, two burly men who held long wooden staffs. Drive her out and take Amadi to his hut. He's being influenced by this outsider. The guards began to advance, but Amadi stepped forward, interposing himself between them and Naya. His voice, full of emotion, broke the silence. If the gods wanted us to live like this, why do I feel incomplete? Why do I feel like something is missing? The crowd held its breath. Kijani slowly turned to face Amadi, his invisible gaze filled with reproach. You are lost, young man, confused by words you don't understand. Don't let it destroy your faith. But Amadi did not back down. He felt something inside him, a courage he had never experienced before. I'm not confused, Kijani. I am searching, and perhaps that is what you fear, that someone will finally seek answers that are not in the traditions. His non-existent eyes were fixed in Kijani's direction, but his attention was on Naya, whose presence at his side gave him strength. The guards hesitated, waiting for a clear order. Kijani raised her hand again, but before she could give the command, Naya spoke, her voice softer now, but still carrying conviction. I am not here to destroy your order, Kijani. I am here to free your people from a lie that you are afraid to face. But if you insist on expelling me, I will. But Amadi has the right to the truth. He has already given the first step. There is no turning back. His words hung in the air like a silent challenge. Amadi felt a lump in his throat. He knew his decision would be a watershed. "I'll go with her," Amadi said finally, his voice firm but charged with emotion. "If there is a truth beyond what we have been taught, I want to find it, even if it means leaving this village forever." The crowd erupted in murmurs. Some called Amadi a fool. Others asked him to come to his senses. But he had already made his decision. Kijani, his fists clenched, stepped forward, his voice shaking with anger. "If you go, Amadi, you will be defying not only the elders, but the gods themselves. You will be banished, and your name will be forgotten by us all." Amadi felt the weight of Kijani's words, but he didn't hesitate. He turned to Naya and nodded. "Let's go now before it's too late." Naya held his arm, guiding him away from the square. The guards tried to block the path, but hesitated when they saw the determination on Amadi's face. Under the cover of night, the two fled along the trail that led to the forest. The sound of drums was behind them, but they could hear hurried footsteps, the guards following them. Amadi's heart was pounding, but he felt no fear. I felt hope. Each step took him closer to the truth, and he knew this journey would change his life forever. The rain began to fall, heavy and steady, as Amadi and Naya walked through the dense forest. The drops hit the broad leaves above them, creating a rhythmic sound that seemed to accompany the hurried beat of Amadi's heart. Both of their breathing was irregular, the result of running to escape the guards. Naya, always one step ahead, seemed to know the way, guiding Amadi steadily through slippery terrain and treacherous routes. When the rain increased and the darkness of the night made the cold almost unbearable, Naya stopped abruptly in front of a rock formation. It was a narrow entrance, barely visible, hidden by dense vegetation. She raised her hand, indicating that they should enter. The cave was small, but it offered shelter from the storm. The sound of rain became muffled as they crossed the threshold, and the near absolute silence within the space seemed to echo Amadi's tumultuous thoughts. He sat on a damp rock, trying to catch his breath, while Naya lit a small oil lamp that she took from her bag. The flickering light revealed the cave's uneven walls, covered in moss and ancient markings that Amadi could not see, but that Naya watched closely. She remained silent for a few moments, as if she were pondering how to start the conversation that would change everything. "There is something you need to know," Naya said finally, breaking the silence. His voice was calm, but carried with a weight that made Amadi raise his head immediately. He didn't respond, just waited. Naya knelt before him and took out an aged leather scroll from her bag. The object looked ancient, its frayed edges suggesting it had passed through many hands. "This is one of the reasons I came here," she explained, carefully unrolling the parchment. "It contains the truth about Senzalima and what happened to his ancestors." Amadi's curiosity grew like a flame fanned by the wind. He leaned forward, listening intently to each word. Naya pointed to the symbols and designs that adorn the parchment. "A long time ago, before your village was called Senzalima, it was known as Amoya, the place of the soul. It was a prosperous place, where people lived in harmony with the spirits in the land. But everything changed when Zoliwa, a powerful shaman, was betrayed." Amadi felt a shiver run down his spine upon hearing the name. "Betrayed?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. Naya nodded, her eyes never leaving the parchment. Zoliwa was the keeper of a secret, something so powerful that it could change the destiny of all humanity. He trusted his people to protect him, but they were consumed by greed. The village leaders stole Zoliwa's secret and tried to use it for their own benefit. When Zoliwa found out, he was furious. Legend has it that he summoned the spirits of darkness and placed a curse on them all, the curse of blindness. Amadi felt his heart tighten. He had never heard this story before. All he knew was what the elders repeated, that blindness was a blessing from the gods, a protection against the evils of the world. "Why?" he asked, his voice thick with confusion and fear. "Why would Zoliwa do this? What was he trying to protect?" Naya looked at him, and for a moment, her eyes glittered with something that looked like sadness. "Zoliwa didn't do it out of revenge," she explained. He believed that by removing his people's sight, he would be protecting them from something terrible, something he called the devastating truth. The silence that followed was almost palpable. Amadi tried to process what he had just heard, but his mind was full of questions. "The curse," he said finally, his voice wavering. "Are you saying it is not a blessing but a prison? That our blindness prevents us from facing this truth?" Naya nodded slowly. "Yes, but physical blindness is not the real problem. The real curse is the fear that has been planted in you. The fear of searching, of questioning, of seeing beyond what they were told." Naya's words hit Amadi like a blow. He remembered the times he questioned his existence, the nights he felt incomplete, the doubts that were always quelled by the teachings of the elders. "So what can we do?" he asked, his voice now full of determination. "How can we break this curse?" Naya rolled up the parchment again and put it in her bag. "The only way to break the curse," she said, "is to face what Zillia would try to hide. This means going to the world beyond the Forbidden Mountain and discovering the truth he so feared." Amadi felt a mixture of fear and excitement. The thought of leaving everything he knew behind was scary, but the possibility of finally finding answers was irresistible. He looked at Naya, his expression resolute. "I'm ready," he said. "If it means freeing my people, I will go all the way." Naya smiled faintly, a smile that carried both hope and apprehension. "Then rest," she said. "The journey will be long, and the answers we seek will not be easy to accept." Amadi nodded, but knew rest would be difficult. His heart was restless, and his mind was filled with images of a future he could barely imagine. As the light of the lamp flickered on the cave walls, he felt that he had taken the first step towards changing not only his life, but the destiny of all of Senzalima. The wind blew cold and relentless as Amadi and Naya reached the top of the Forbidden Mountain. The trees that once surrounded them were gone, replaced by rough rocks and a vast sky, painted with shades of red and gold by the setting sun. The air was thinner, and each breath felt like a monumental effort. Despite his tiredness, Amadi felt something different there, an energy that seemed to pulse beneath his feet, as if the ground itself were alive. He knew that this was a sacred place, filled with a history that he still did not fully understand. Naya, always ahead, stopped when she reached a clearing surrounded by rocks that seemed to be carved by invisible hands. Amadi stretched out his arms, trying to feel the space around him. The sharp wind caressed his skin, bringing with it a metallic smell that he couldn't identify. Naya remained silent, but he knew she was observing something. The tension in the air was palpable, as if the place was waiting for them. Suddenly, a light began to appear in the center of the clearing, small at first, but quickly growing until it illuminated the entire space. Amadi instinctively stepped back, feeling the heat of that presence, but Naya stood firm, her eyes fixed on the figure that now formed before them. It was a humanoid figure, but it was clearly not flesh and blood. The light that made it up was intense, almost blinding. Even for Amadi, who had no eyes to see, he could feel the glow on his skin, like a heat that penetrated deeper than the body. The figure spoke, and its voice was not of a single tone, but a mixture of sounds, as if several voices were speaking at the same time. "I am Fumo, the guardian of Zillia. You have reached the threshold of the unknown. But before they take the next step, they need to prove themselves worthy." Amadi felt a shiver run through his body. He already expected challenges, but Fumo's presence was more imposing than he imagined. Naya took a step forward, keeping her gaze fixed on the spirit. "We are here because we seek the truth," she said, her voice firm. "We are willing to face whatever is necessary." Fumo tilted his head, as if evaluating his words. "Truth is not something to be sought lightly," he replied. "It blinds those who desire it only out of ambition, but it enlightens those who seek it with courage." Amadi felt his heart speed up. He knew this was a test, but he still didn't understand what was expected of them. Fumo raised a luminous hand, and the wind around them stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was overwhelming, almost deafening. When the spirit spoke again, its voice seemed to echo directly in Amadi's mind. "Answer me," "Young man, what is seen with the heart, but blinds the eyes that desire it?" Amadi froze. The riddle was simple in structure, but loaded with depth. He felt the weight of the words as they resonated in his mind. Naya remained silent, watching Amadi. She knew this answer had to come from him. He closed his hands into fists, trying to calm the torrent of thoughts that invaded him. His mind returned to everything he had experienced up until that moment. The doubts he always carried, the truths that began to emerge with Naya's arrival, the feeling of incompleteness that had never left him. He thought about the curse, about what Zulua tried to hide, and about the courage it took to seek the unknown. Then like a flash, the answer came. "The truth," he said finally, his voice low but full of conviction. "The truth is seen with the heart, but it blinds those who desire it without being ready for it." Mfumu remained motionless for a moment that seemed to last an eternity. Then, its light intensified, filling the entire clearing with an almost unbearable brightness. Amadi felt the heat increase, but he didn't back down. "The courage in your response gives you access," said Mfumu finally. "But be careful, young man. The truth has a price, and not everyone is willing to pay it." The spirit began to dissipate, but before it disappeared completely, he raised his luminous hand again. A trail began to form before them, marked by glowing stones that emanated a soft light. "Follow this path," said Mfumu. "He will lead them to the truth they seek. But remember, the truth is not kind. It can heal, but it can also destroy." And then, he disappeared, leaving only the glow of the stones as a guide. Amadi remained motionless for a few moments, trying to process what had just happened. He felt a firm hand on his shoulder and turned towards Naya. "You did what many wouldn't have the courage to do," she said, her voice softer than he had ever heard it. "But the journey is not over yet. Are you ready to continue?" Amadi took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. "I don't know if I'm ready," he admitted, "but I know I can't turn back now." Naya nodded, and together, they began walking along the illuminated path toward an uncertain but inevitable future. The air inside the mountain was thick and stuffy, charged with an energy that seemed alive. Amadi felt the weight of the place on his shoulders, as if the environment itself was watching his steps. Naya, at her side, held tightly to the lamp that lit the way, its flames flickering with each invisible breeze that snaked through the depths of the cave. They had followed the trail marked by Mfumu's shining stones, which led them to an even darker opening. Now, the feeling was that they had crossed a threshold into a world where reality was shaped by memory and the truth that was hidden in the past. As they advanced, Amadi began to hear a peculiar sound. It was quiet at first, like a whisper, but soon it became clearer, a rhythmic pulse that seemed to match the beat of his own heart. "Do you feel that?" he asked, his voice low, almost like a whisper, afraid of disturbing the silence around him. Naya nodded. "It's the crystal," she replied, her voice filled with a mixture of reverence and apprehension. "We are close." Amadi swallowed, his stomach churning with a mixture of fear and expectation. Each step brought them closer to what he knew would be the decisive moment. The cave opened into a large chamber, lit by a light that came from no visible source. In the center, floating above a formation of black stones, was the crystal. It was larger than Amadi had imagined, glowing with a hypnotic intensity that seemed to draw his attention even in the absence of eyes. "The eye of the horizon," murmured Naya, her eyes fixed on the object. The light from the crystal pulsed in constant rhythms, each pulse seeming to generate a wave of energy that filled the room. The sound that Amadi had heard before was now deafening, like a beat that echoed inside his mind. "And now?" he asked, but before Naya could respond, the crystal began projecting images into the air. They were hazy scenes at first, but they soon gained clarity. Amadi saw human figures, ancestors of the village, gathered around what appeared to be an altar. In the center, a man with an imposing presence, who he knew to be Zulua, held the same crystal. His voice echoed in the images, powerful and full of warning. "This is eternal vision, a gift that connects the human spirit to the world beyond time. It must not be used for personal gain. Its purpose is to protect, never dominate. But the figures around him had expressions of greed and despair. The scenes changed quickly. Now the same men were stealing Zoliwa's crystal while he was in meditation. They took him away and tried to use him to gain wealth and power. But instead, the crystal's light began to glow violently, releasing a wave of energy that knocked them back. Each of them fell to the ground, screaming, and when they stood up, their eyes were empty like Amadi's. Zoliwa appeared again, her expression filled with sadness and disappointment. He raised his hands and, in a voice that seemed to shake the very foundations of the cave, declared, "You have stolen what did not belong to you. And now, this curse will be their legacy until they learn the true meaning of the vision." Amadi stepped back, feeling a wave of emotion wash over him. The images faded, but the weight of what he had just witnessed remained. He turned to Naya, his voice thick with disbelief. "All of this, was it because of them? Because of your greed?" Naya nodded, but her expression was softer. "Yes, Amadi, but what you need to understand is that the curse wasn't just a punishment. It was Zoliwa's attempt to protect his people from the destruction that the truth could cause. He knew that the crystal was too powerful to be entrusted to those who were not ready." Amadi looked back at the crystal, who kept pulsing as if alive. He knew what needed to be done, but the idea terrified him. "If the truth was what has cursed us," he said, his trembling but firm voice, "it may be her who will set us free." Naya approached, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Do what your heart says, Amadi," she said, with softness that seemed to bring some peace to her internal whirlwind. "Courage has always been your vision." Amadi took a deep breath and stepped forward. He raised his hands, feeling the heat of the crystal increased as he approached. The beats seemed to accelerate, matching the intensity of their own determination. He knew that destroying the crystal would mean challenging Zoliwa's legacy, but he also knew it was the only way to free his people from prison that had been built on secrets and lies. "For you," he murmured, thinking about his village. "For us." Then, with all the force he managed to gather, he hit the crystal with his hands, feeling a wave of energy crossing his body as the light exploded around him. Amadi destroys the crystal, freeing the village from the curse. Upon returning to Senzalima, he is received as a hero. He tells the truth about Zoliwa's sacrifice and the error of the ancestors. Gradually, the children begin to be born with eyes again, symbolizing a new beginning. Although still blind, Amadi realizes that his true vision has always been in his heart, and the village begins to rebuild his future with hope and unity. If you enjoyed this video, please help us grow by subscribing to this humble channel. And if you'd like to watch more videos like this, we prepared the next video especially for you. Click here to watch.